The next morning, Karen sat at her home office desk, really just her kitchen table with a "Nay your hode waits ETHC or YINAT or placard she'd printed at FedEx, furiously typing complaint letters. Her fingers flew across the keyboard like a pianist performing a symphony of vindication. "Dear City Planning Department," she dictated to herself, "I am writing to inform you of BLTNT permit violations occurring at 1247 Maple Grove Lane." Her husband Derek shuffled into the kitchen in his bathrobe, looking defeated. "Karen, honey, maybe we should just—" "Don't you honey me, Derek Whitfield," she snapped without looking up. "While you've been hiding in your man cave, I've been stealing our property values. Do you know what an unpermitted pool does to neighborhood comps?" Derek poured coffee with the resigned efficiency of a man who'd learned to navigate around Hurricane Karen. "I just think maybe calling 911 was strategic," Karen declared, finally turning to face him. "Now there's an official record of the violation. Paper trail, Derek. That's how you win wars." The doorbell rang, interrupting Derek's attempt to explain that HOA disputes weren't actually wars. Karen smoothed her hair and opened the door to find Jake Martinez standing on her porch, holding a manila folder and wearing the patient expression of a man trying very hard not to lose his temper. "Morning, Karen. We need to talk. If this is about yesterday's necessary emergency response, it's about this." Jake held up the folder. "Building permits, pool installation permits, electrical permits, every single document you claimed doesn't exist. All properly filed, all approved by the city, all completely legal." Karen's confidence wavered for exactly 3 seconds before reassembling itself. "Those could be forgeries." "Karen," Jake's voice carried the weight of infinite patience being tested to its limits. "My wife is a city planning engineer. She literally processes these permits for a living." "Well, that's nepotism. It's being married to someone who knows how to follow proper procedures." Jake stepped closer, and Karen caught a whiff of his cologne, annoyingly pleasant. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop this crusade, or I'm going to file harassment charges." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You can't intimidate me, Jake Martinez. I know my rights as an HOA board member." "You're not actually on the board, Karen." The words hit her like a slap. "Excuse me. There are 5 board positions. You lost the election last year by 37 votes. You're not on the board." Karen felt the world tilt slightly. I represent the community's interests. You represent your own interests." Jake turned to leave, then paused. "And Karen, that 911 stunt yesterday? Chief Rodriguez is considering charging you with filing a false report. Might want to think about that." As Jake walked away, Karen stood in her doorway, clutching the frame for support. Derek appeared behind her, coffee mug in hand. "Honey, maybe it's time to get my phone," Karen commanded, her voice deadly quiet. "I'm calling the HOA president. If Jake Martinez thinks he can waltz into my neighborhood and build whatever he wants, he's about to learn exactly who he's dealing with." Derek sighed, recognizing the particular tone that meant Karen was about to make everything worse. Much, much worse. Karen sat in her car outside the community center for 20 minutes, watching board members file out while her rage slowly crystallized into something more dangerous: determination with a plan. She drove home through the winding streets of Maple Grove, noting every minor violation she could weaponize later. The Hendersons' mailbox was 3 inches closer to the street than regulations allowed. The Patel family had planted non-approved shrubs along their property line. Mrs. Chen's decorative garden gnome clearly violated the no lawn ornaments clause. But Jake Martinez's house looked perfect, which somehow made everything worse. At home, Derek was watching football with religious devotion, a beer balanced on his considerable belly. He looked up nervously as Karen entered, recognizing her particular brand of quiet fury. "How did it go, honey?" "Derek, what do you know about property law?" "Ah, not much." "Why?" Karen began pacing their living room like a caged tiger. "Permits can be challenged, especially if there were procedural irregularities in the approval process." "Karen, please tell me you're not I'm going to request a full audit of Jake's permits. She grabbed her laptop and began typing furiously. Starting with soil composition tests. Pool construction requires specific geological surveys to ensure foundation stability. Derek muted the television, sensing disaster approaching like a thunderstorm. Maybe we should take a vacation. Get away from all this neighborhood drama. Drama? Karen's fingers froze over the keyboard. Drama? Derek, this is about property values, community standards, the very fabric of civilized society. It's about a swimming pool, Karen. She stared at him with the expression she usually reserved for people who didn't sort their recycling properly. You know what your problem is, Derek? You have no vision, no understanding of the bigger picture. The doorbell rang, saving Derek from having to respond. Karen opened it to find a young woman in a business suit holding an official-looking envelope. Karen Whitfield? Yes. You've been served. The woman handed over the envelope and walked briskly back to her car. Karen tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, Derek peering over her shoulder as she read. It's from Jake, she whispered. Cease and desist order. He's actually suing me for harassment. Derek whistled low. How much? $50,000 in damages, plus attorney fees. Karen sank onto their couch, the legal document fluttering to the floor. He's claiming I've created a hostile living environment, interfered with his legal property improvements, and, oh God, intentionally inflicted emotional distress on his minor children. For the first time in months, Karen was speechless. Derek picked up the document and read the details, his expression growing increasingly grim. Karen, this is serious. He's got documentation going back 6 months. Every complaint you filed, every time you photographed his property, every conversation with other neighbors. He was me. Looks like his wife, the city engineer, knows a thing or two about building legal cases too. Karen felt something shift inside her chest, not quite panic, but its close cousin, desperate fury. This is war, Derek. If Jake Martinez thinks he can intimidate me with lawyers and lawsuits, he's about to discover exactly what he's unleashed. She stood up, grabbed her phone, and scrolled to a contact she'd hoped never to use. Her ex-boyfriend from law school, Martin Price, who'd grown up to become exactly the kind of lawyer who specialized in making people's lives miserable. Martin? It's Karen Whitfield. Yes, from constitutional law class. Listen, I need someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Derek watched his wife pace and plot, wondering when their quiet suburban life had turned into a legal thriller, and whether their marriage would survive Karen's latest crusade. Outside, completely unnoticed by either of them, Mrs. Chen was once again recording everything from behind her perfectly manicured hedges, her smile growing wider with each passing day. Karen stormed into the community center conference room like she was storming the beaches of Normandy, her stack of printed emails and photos clutched against her chest like armor. The monthly HOA board meeting was already in session, and President Patricia Wong looked up from her agenda with barely concealed irritation. Karen, you're not on the agenda. I don't need to be on the agenda, Karen announced, slamming her evidence onto the conference table. I'm here representing the silent majority of homeowners who are CCK and tired of watching our community standards crumble. The 5 actual board members exchanged glances. Board member Thompson, a retired accountant with infinite patience, gestured to an empty chair. Please, have a seat and tell us what's troubling you. Karen remained standing, preferring the psychological advantage of height. Jake Martinez is building an illegal pool that violates 17 separate community guidelines. When I tried to protect our neighborhood by alerting the proper authorities, he threatened me with legal action. Did he show you his permits? Asked board member Sarah Kim. Alleged permits, Karen corrected. Anyone can forge documents these days. What matters is that his construction violates the aesthetic harmony we've worked so hard to maintain. President Wong opened a folder. Karen, I have Jake's permit applications right here. He submitted them to the board 6 months ago. We approved them unanimously. The room fell silent except for the humming of fluorescent lights. Karen felt something cold settle in her stomach. That's impossible. I would have been notified. Only board members receive construction notifications. Thompson explained gently. You're not. I ain't a concerned HOME. Karen's voice cracked with desperation. I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years. I organize the holiday decorating committee. I maintain the community garden. You also called 911 on a legal construction project, interrupted Wang. Fire Chief Rodriguez called me this morning. He's considering a formal complaint about resource misuse. Karen's knees suddenly felt weak, but she locked them, refusing to sit. This is about more than permits. It's about precedent. If we let Jake build whatever he wants, what's next? Hot tubs? Gazebos? Before you know it, Maple Grove will look like some trailer park. Karen, Sarah Kim said quietly, Jake's building a modest in-ground pool behind his house. It's barely visible from the street. It's the principle. Karen slammed her hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. Rules exist for a reason. President Wang closed the folder with deliberate precision. You're right, rules do exist for a reason, including the rule that says harassment of neighbors can result in HOA sanctions against the harassing homeowner. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Karen looked around the table, seeing expressions ranging from pity to active dislike. You're going to sanction me? After everything I've done for this community. We're going to strongly suggest you find a hobby that doesn't involve monitoring your neighbor's lawful activities, Wang replied. Before this escalates further, Karen gathered her papers with trembling hands, her face burning with humiliation and rage. Fine. But when property values start dropping because of precedent creep, don't come crying to me. She marched toward the door, then turned back for one final shot. And when the Martinez pool becomes a mosquito breeding ground and starts spreading West Nile virus, remember this moment. As the conference room door slammed behind her, Karen heard Thompson's voice. Should we be worried about her? Standing in the hallway, Karen pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she hadn't used in 3 years. Her sister Linda, the lawyer. If the HOA board wanted to play hardball, she'd show them what hardball really looked like. But as she dialed, Karen caught her reflection in the hallway mirror and paused. When had her face become so sharp? So angry? When had she become the kind of person who called 911 on her neighbors? The phone rang once before Linda's voicemail picked up. You've reached Linda Whitfield Legal Services. If this is about an HOA dispute, hang up and call a therapist instead. Karen stared at the phone, wondering if even her own sister had turned against her. Martin Price arrived at Karen's house 3 days later, looking like every suburban woman's nightmare of a divorce attorney, expensive suit, predatory smile, and a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. He set up shop in Karen's dining room, spreading legal documents across her antique table like a general planning an invasion. So, Martin said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, your neighbor is trying to intimidate you with legal action for exercising your rights as a concerned homeowner. Exactly. Karen poured him coffee in her finest china, the cups rattling slightly from her nervous excitement. Jake Martinez thinks he can just waltz into our neighborhood and ignore 12 years of established community standards. Martin flipped through Jake's cease and desist order, occasionally making disapproving noises. Harassment? Emotional distress? These are serious allegations, Karen, but they're also difficult to prove if we play this correctly. Derek hovered in the doorway, watching his wife collaborate with the legal equivalent of a hired assassin. Karen, maybe we should consider. Derek, please. The adults are speaking. Karen didn't even look at her husband, her attention laser-focused on Martin's strategy session. Here's what we're going to do, Martin announced, pulling out a fresh legal pad. We're going to file a countersuit claiming that Martinez's pool construction has damaged your property values, created drainage issues affecting your foundation, and violated multiple HOA covenants. Can we prove any of that? Derek asked weakly. Martin's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. We don't need to prove it, Derek. We just need to make it expensive enough for them to settle. Legal fees have a way of motivating reasonable behavior. Karen felt a thrill of vindication surge through her veins. What about the permit issues? Oh, we're absolutely challenging those. I have contacts in city planning who owe me favors. We'll request a full review of the approval process, claim procedural irregularities, demand environmental impact studies. Martin was warming to his theme now, clearly enjoying himself. By the time we're done, Jake Martinez will be drowning in legal paperwork. That evening, after Martin left with a $5,000 retainer check, Karen stood in her backyard, staring across the fence at Jake's partially completed pool. The excavation was nearly finished, and she could already imagine children laughing and splashing while she sat in her perfectly ordered, perfectly quiet yard. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Jake. Please call me. We need to talk before this gets worse." Karen stared at the message for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the reply button. For just a second, she remembered Jake at last year's block party, grilling burgers for the entire neighborhood, his daughter Sophia teaching all the other kids how to make friendship bracelets. He'd seemed nice, normal. Then she remembered the humiliation at the HOA meeting, the cease and desist order, the way the board members had looked at her like she was some kind of crazy person. She deleted the message without responding. The next morning, Karen woke to find a surveyor in Jake's backyard, measuring distances and taking photographs. Through her kitchen window, she watched Jake and his wife Maria standing by their back door, deep in conversation with a man in a hard hat who kept pointing toward Karen's property line. "They're up to something," she told Derek over breakfast. "Maybe they're just..." Karen's phone rang, interrupting her husband's attempt at reason. The caller ID showed Martin Price's office. "Karen, we have a problem." Martin's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I just received a call from Jake Martinez's attorney. They're not just pursuing harassment charges anymore." "What do you mean?" "They're going after you for filing false police reports, misuse of emergency services, and..." Martin paused, and Karen could hear papers rustling. "They're also claiming you've been trespassing on their property to take photographs." Karen's blood turned to ice water. "That's ridiculous. I was on the sidewalk." "Were you always on the sidewalk, Karen?" "Because they have security camera footage going back 6 months." The coffee mug slipped from Karen's fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor as she realized that her war against Jake Martinez had just escalated beyond anything she'd imagined possible. Outside, the surveyor continued his methodical work, documenting everything that would soon become evidence in a legal battle that threatened to destroy not just Karen's crusade, but her entire life. Karen Whitfield stood in her pristine kitchen, clutching her phone with white knuckles as she barked into the receiver. "Yes, 911? I need to report an immediate safety violation at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. There's an illegal swimming pool installation happening right here, and it's creating a public hazard." The dispatcher's weary voice crackled through the speaker. "Madam, is anyone in immediate danger?" "The entire neighborhood is in danger." Karen shrieked, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair trembling with indignation. She pressed her face against her living room window, watching as her neighbor Jake Martinez directed construction workers around his backyard. "They're digging without proper permits. And, oh my God, they just hit something with the excavator." What Karen had witnessed was actually Jake's 8-year-old daughter's forgotten sandbox bucket getting crushed, but in her mind, it was clearly a gas line explosion waiting to happen. 20 minutes later, 3 fire trucks, 2 police cars, and an ambulance screamed down the quiet suburban street, their sirens wailing like banshees. Karen emerged from her house wearing her official HOA board member sash, the one she'd ordered online without authorization, and marched toward the chaos she'd created. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she announced, positioning herself importantly in front of the first responder vehicles. "I'm Karen Whitfield, head of neighborhood safety for the Maple Grove Homeowners Association." Fire Chief Rodriguez stepped out of his truck, looking annoyed. "Ma'am, we received reports of a gas line rupture and potential casualties. Where's the emergency?" Karen pointed dramatically at Jake's backyard, where workers had stopped digging and were now staring at the emergency response convoy in bewilderment. Right there. Illegal construction without proper HOA approval. That's not an emergency, ma'am. It most certainly is. Article 12, Section 4 of our community guidelines clearly states, Lady, interrupted Officer Martinez, no relation to Jake, calling 911 for HOA disputes is illegal. You've just wasted thousands of dollars in emergency resources. Karen's face flushed red, but her righteousness burned brighter than her embarrassment. I was protecting this community. That's what leaders do. As the emergency vehicles began their annoyed exodus, Karen noticed Jake standing in his driveway, arms crossed, shaking his head. Their eyes met across the street, and she saw something that made her stomach clench. Disappointment. Not anger, disappointment, which somehow felt worse. This isn't over, she muttered under her breath, already plotting her next move. If the authorities wouldn't listen to reason, she'd have to take more creative measures to maintain order in her neighborhood. Behind her perfectly manicured hedge, Karen didn't notice Mrs. Chen from next door quietly recording the entire spectacle on her phone, a knowing smile playing at her lips.